Thank you, Tatiana. Now we've got some breaking news for you here, and it's the Blackburn's MP has backed calls for a public inquiry into the grooming gangs of vulnerable young women girls, saying that the issue continues to haunt the town. And this is the independent MP, Adnan Hussain, who said, like so many of my constituents, I am horrified by the abuse and sexual exploitation of predominantly white working-class girls in mostly northern towns at the hands of grooming gangs. I therefore believe that should the victims and survivors of these crimes feel the need for a further public inquiry, and it's in the public interest, including the strong views expressed by my constituents, then it points to this being the correct route for the government to take. Well, it's surprise and very welcome news. And let's discuss this now with our national reporter, Charlie Peters. Charlie, yesterday the report, we covered this live on the show when the Labour Party came out to give us this 5-town report, locally controlled, no real legal teeth. It was slammed as a whitewash. A very surprising addition, perhaps, in Adnan Hussain, but I've got to say, most welcome. Tell us more.
Well, Martin, he refers specifically to correspondence with his constituents after voting against that inquiry a week prior. So clearly significant responses in Blackburn to what happened in the parliamentary vote. But he also takes aim at the Tories for introducing this amendment as a wrecking amendment, getting in the way of the Labour government's social care bill for children, the children's wellbeing proposals. But yeah, Adnan Hussain there, that Blackburn MP, specifically referring to abuse of predominantly white working-class girls by gangs in Lancashire and Blackburn in particular. So clearly, like many of the MPs who've intervened on this issue, responding to significant pressure from the local population. And as you say, Martin, potentially a surprising inclusion due to the nature of this MP's politics. But we have seen several Labour MPs now intervene, most notoriously and most sort of influentially, Sarah Champion, the MP for Rotherham, who yesterday was delivering from very stern criticism of these proposals, asking critical questions of Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, such as whether these new inquiries would have statutory powers and would they be on a statutory footing? That is, will they be able to compel witnesses to give evidence as inquiries are allowed to under the 2005 Act. However, it seems that while Yvette Cooper said they're going to be a accountability framework, that actual power won't be there, and so many survivors have expressed concerns about that. But yes, it just adds now to the chorus of parliamentarians across all parties, of blue, red and indeed none, coming together to call for this national inquiry into the grooming gang scandal.
And Charlie, it's especially of note what Adnan Hussain is doing here. He's a parliamentarian that perhaps we won't agree with him on very many things. He got in at the general election last time on a pro-Gaza ticket. But he did say last weekend on social media, because I invited him on the show last week, I'd love him to come on the show. He said this: British Pakistanis are not responsible for the crimes of rapists and paedophiles just because they happen to be of the same ethnicity as these criminals. Hear, hear. We all agree with that. And he said the demonising of a whole minority group by some politicians and media is deeply troubling and, in fact, highly dangerous. And I said to him, Mr. Hussain, thank you for speaking out as a moderate Muslim and condemning those on the fringes. And just, again, a further note, Charlie Peters, Blackburn has the 4th highest percentile of Muslim voters in any seat in the United Kingdom. 46%. This is the government's own data. 46% Muslim. Yet he wants an inquiry, presumably because he wants to say this isn't all Muslims, which of course it isn't. So actually, Charlie Peters, I think this is especially noteworthy, especially commendable, and I would love to get Adnan Hussain on the show. What he's doing here, Charlie, is very, very positive.
Yeah, and it comes after the government yesterday, as part of this intervention, said that they want more information on ethnicity data. They want more information on the religious or cultural drivers behind this form of child abuse. And perhaps that might be developed now as part of this rapid 3-month audit led by Baroness Louise Casey. Information that could lead to more people being confident to speak out with more facts under their belt. Because as it stands at the moment, Martin, there isn't so much information because so many police forces and local authorities have neglected to adequately collect data and information on this most appalling form of child abuse.
OK, well, stick around, Charlie, because I've got another guest to bring in now. I know you'd like to speak to him, and that's the leader of the Welsh Conservatives, Darren Millar, member of the Welsh Senate. Darren, welcome to the show. I'm delighted to have you on, and we've got you on not only because you've got a lot to say about this, but because of an incredible incident that happened to you, I believe, yesterday when you raised the issue of grooming gangs in the Senate earlier this week. Let's take a quick look at that video, and then we'll get your response.
One victim has even said that she was strangled, she was threatened with a knife, and her home was threatened with being burnt down. She was then raped, I'm afraid to say, First Minister, 1,000 times. She didn't know the number of perpetrators because there were so many.
I need you to come to your question now. You are being overly descriptive and I think verging on not being totally respectful of the victim at this point. So can you tone down the rhetoric slightly?
I'm afraid I'm simply reading facts.
No, you're not.
No, you're not.
The use of language in this place needs to be making sure that you are keeping well away from inflaming any kind of discrimination or inciting of any kind of discrimination. You were doing very well, Darren Millar, with your first 2 questions in avoiding that. In your third one, you've become overly descriptive, and I need you to now reflect on that and just ask the question again, please.
I am not seeking to inflame anything.
Good. I'm glad you confirmed that. I'm glad you've confirmed that.
Well, first of all, Darren Millar, well done for keeping your calm. And secondly, isn't it always the same? They're trying to shoot the messenger and ignore the message. You didn't say anything that was factually incorrect, and yet you became the bogeyman.
Well, it was pretty astonishing, and the public have made it clear that they were not impressed with that interjection. Of course, what I was trying to do was to shine a necessary light on the problems that we've got here in Wales. You know, unfortunately, the Professor J inquiry did find evidence of grooming gangs operating in the Swansea area. And we know from Charlie Peters' excellent documentary that there was another victim who spoke out about her personal experiences. And those were the ones that I was describing in the chamber that day. And, you know, that victim has been in touch with me to say how disappointed she was with the way in which I was interrupted from sharing her experiences. Because, look, we've got to put party politics aside on this. And that's why I'm so pleased to hear news about other MPs now joining with the number of others who've already spoken out, you know, against their party lines sometimes, to be able to call for this inquiry. We need to know here in Wales that there's not another Rotherham or a Rochdale happening on our doorstep. The only place that the J inquiry looked at was Swansea, and it found some evidence. We know that places elsewhere have also seen problems. Crime Stoppers has had a national campaign here in Wales because young people as young as 11 and 14 have been offered vaping products in return for sexual favours, you know, not just by one individual, but by a number of individuals in flats upstairs of their local shops. So we've got to get to the bottom of this situation. That's why we have said if there's no national inquiry, and I don't know why the UK government is so resistant to having one of those, but if there's no national inquiry across the UK, then we need a Wales-wide inquiry here.
And Charlie Peters, this would come as no surprise to you that as this story rolls on and on and on, more towns are coming to light where this is happening. And yet the attitude of the Welsh Parliament, the Senate here, is simply to, well, be quiet. You're inflaming things.
Yes, well, Martin, South Wales has been on my radar for this issue for several years now. And I was glad to hear reference to our work being raised in the Welsh Parliament, in particular promoting that voice of that survivor Emily, a very brave lady who has spoken out about experiences of being trafficked from Wales to other towns in England as well over the border for further abuse, trafficked and abused by several gangs. But Darren, I'd just like to ask you, when you had that experience in the Senate, was your thought that that sort of response from the presiding officer could have silenced other survivors from speaking out, that it could have made them more nervous to stand up because their cases could be described as inflammatory?
Well, look, I am determined to make sure that the things which have happened when people have blown the whistle on these issues in other parts of the UK and they've been told to be quiet because of community tensions, etc. I'm determined to make sure that those things don't happen here in Wales. And that's why I'm calling of people, from across the party spectrum to support Emily and other survivors in their campaign for a Wales-wide or UK national inquiry. We've got to get to the bottom of these things. There has been insufficient investigation so far. We know that the Welsh Government has simply accepted the assurances of people like the South Wales Police and local authorities in Wales to date. And yet we know from the J report itself that those assurances weren't worth a bean when she went in and she further investigated and found victims. Many of those victims had been victim shamed. So these things are not acceptable. We need to understand the extent of the problems in Wales so that we can get to grips with them. Following that exchange in the chamber, the First Minister told me that she was disappointed with the fact that I had raised questions about this matter, which again I was pretty unimpressed with, and then sought to give me assurances that these things were under control, if you like, because things were being implemented from the J report, and because we had a law which required people to blow the whistle when they saw people who were victims of abuse and exploitation. That law has failed to protect other people already. It's been in place since 2014, and yet we know there have been other victims since then. So we've got to get our act together. We need an inquiry here in Wales, and that's what I'm fighting for alongside these very, very brave victims who've been prepared to stick their neck out and speak out.
Well, Darren Millar, I just find it astonishing that the response of the First Minister and of the Senate is to simply bury their heads in the sand and try and silence you, and trying to, and in the instance of doing that, that obviously deters survivors from coming forward. But well done for speaking out, and please continue to do so. Darren Millar there, the leader of the Welsh Conservatives in the Senate, and of course always fantastic reporting. Charlie Peters, the man who has, I believe, single-handedly made this simply too big to ignore. Gentlemen, thanks to both of you. Always an absolute pleasure. Thank you.